Good evening, and thank you to all the candidates for joining us for tonight's candidate forums, co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters and AARP of North Dakota. My name is Tiffany Ross, and I will be your moderator for this forum tonight between candidates for North Dakota District 10. We thank the City of Fargo for its use of its commission chamber for the forum. This forum is being streamed live and also recorded for playback on the City of Fargo's government PEG TV channel, TV Fargo 56. The recording will also be available via the League of Women Voters of the Red River Valley YouTube channel and Facebook page. Volunteers you see tonight include Amy Phillips, Lynn Dr. Pinnick, Sandy Seidler, and Kendra Greenlee. All of these individuals and others who aren't here tonight, we thank you for making this event possible. These candidate forums exist to provide the public with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss the issues that are important to members of the public. I must add that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. The views expressed in each forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters or other sponsors. The League of Women Voters will post complete, unedited recordings of the forums. Editing is authorized only for official media reporting. Excerpts or edited clips of candidate forums will not be used for partisan political purposes. The League of Women Voters of North Dakota, along with Forum Communications, also offer a voter's guide for elections across North Dakota called Vote 411. The vast majority of candidates in North Dakota have participated in answering the questions on the voter's guide. We thank them and encourage those who haven't yet to please do so. Look for an email from the League of Women Voters of North Dakota with a link or email from us or email us at nodaclwv@gmail.com for a new link. Before we begin, I would like to review the rules and procedures. Questions for our audience are submitted prior, online, and if you just thought of one, please see a volunteer in the back, and they have postcards and pencils, and then they'll bring them up to me. Questions may be screened for clarity or combined with similar questions. All candidates will be given an opportunity to address each question. Each candidate will have 1 minute for their opening statement and one for each question. All candidates will have a chance to answer all of the questions. We may have questions that are asked of specific candidates, but all will be given an opportunity to answer that question. At the conclusion of the question and answer period, candidates will be given another 1 minute for closing remarks. A timer, which is back here on the wall, will indicate how much time is remaining and will indicate when your time is done. When you hear the bell, that means your time has expired. Please complete your sentence or thought so that we may move on to the next candidate or question. We will begin with opening statements with Ryan and then proceed down the line in turn so that everyone will get a chance to respond. So, Ryan, you're ready for your opening statement? Okay. Yes.
Thank you for everybody that has joined us in person and anybody that's watching online. So my name is Ryan Braunberger. I am the current sitting senator for District 10 in Fargo. Some of the things I want to work on when we get to Bismarck if re-elected is I want to work on early child education and childcare because I think it's very important that we support our families in our community. We also need to make sure that we provide housing for everybody and make sure that there is affordable housing across the state. We have a lot of issues that are currently experiencing it within the Fargo-Moorhead community in regards to both these issues, where there are individuals that are having to choose between being housed with their food and being able to go to work without childcare. So these are some of the things that I want to hopefully discuss tonight, and I hope to get reelected in November. Thank you.
George?
I'm George Ruffhead. I'm the Senate candidate. I'm a teacher at a local school. I teach history and Latin. And the reason I'm running is because I'm concerned about the state of our schools in general. Right now, when kids reach grade 10, only 25% are proficient in math and half can read. So our schools need help. And I think I have a lot of actionable, simple things that don't cost any extra money, ways that I can help the schools. I'm concerned about the safety of our communities. Fargo and North Dakota in general doesn't feel as safe as it used to, and I'd like the legislature to help out with municipalities in that regard. And the last thing is I'd like to keep our economy humming. The thing that brings North Dakota is the high-paying jobs. The reason people stay is for family and community. but we have to get them here first. And so I want to keep the jobs and the economy humming the way it has been for the last 10 years.
Thank you, Hamida.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, everyone, for coming and the people who are watching online. My name is Hamida Dakane. I grew up in Kenya. 12 years ago, I moved to US to pursue education. I graduated from NDSU with emergency management and international studies. Later, I get a master's in public administration from University of Mary. I'm deeply passionate about community impact. I have worked in group homes. I have worked on immigrant issues for the past 12 years that I've been in this community. For the last 2 years, I was honored to serve the people of District 10 in North Dakota House of Representatives. That time, I focused on getting real results for the people of District 10. I have introduced bills. I have worked with my colleagues across the aisle, and I am running for re-election because I understand the struggle many in our community are facing every day. I hear from residents every day about how costs are high and how much the states can support working family. I have a great success working across the aisle, and I would love to be a common sense solution for North Dakotans.
Thank you, Hamida. Jared?
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Hamida, George, Ryan, and to the League. I much appreciate it. My name is Jared Hendricks. My father raised a family of 5 on a police officer's salary. For the last 17 years of my life, I've been involved as a mostly unpaid grassroots citizen lobbyist, trying to protect our freedoms in Bismarck. I've been the guy who led the term limits campaign in North Dakota, as well as mandatory retirement for Congress. We collected over 88,000 citizen signatures to allow voters to decide these issues. You know, we've got some problems. Cost of living is a big issue. That's largely related to what happens in Washington, D.C. Frankly, the leadership of both parties has contributed to the inflation we're seeing, but there are things we can do here locally in Bismarck to prioritize our state budget so that we're not wasting money on things that are unnecessary, and we're prioritizing our roads, our schools, our infrastructure, our public safety, and the things that really matter that have a public benefit for everybody. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Candidate Steve Swintek couldn't be here tonight, so I'll read a statement that he sent in his absence. He says, "Thank you for inviting me to participate in tonight's forum. Unfortunately, due to a medical procedure that was scheduled months ago for today, I am unable to attend. While I regret not being there in person, I want to emphasize the key priorities that are central to our campaign. We are focused on fighting inflation, addressing property tax reform, ensuring access to affordable childcare, workforce development, supporting our new law enforcement and first responders, improve mental health and addiction services, and strengthening our schools. These are the issues that impact the daily lives of North Dakotans. I remain committed to finding solutions that strengthen our communities and make life more affordable for working families. I also appreciate the League of Women Voters of the Red River Valley's efforts to provide a platform for these important discussions, helping our citizens stay informed and engaged. It has been very rewarding for me to visit with the voters of District 10 to listen to their thoughts, suggestions, and ideas. I believe through servant leadership and civil discourse, we can resolve issues and meet the needs of residents. Thank you once again for allowing me to share my thoughts." So with that, the first question of the evening is, what are your plans to support economic development in District 10? How will you attract new businesses while supporting existing ones? And we'll start with George.
I think the government in general has a very limited role to play in as far as economic development. I think if we keep it simple, things go best. We need to make sure that people aren't getting stopped by regulations, that they understand the rules that it takes to start a business, to keep one going, that licensures and things that happen in whatever industry it is are clear and that they know who to go to. A lot of times what happens is people have great ideas on a business. They want to do something or they want to get employees and they don't really know who to turn to. They don't know the rules of the industry, or when they read the rules of the industry, they're convoluted, hard to understand, and they don't know who to go to. So I'd like to make things simpler for people so that they can understand, so that we remove any roadblocks to people's creativity and their hard work.
Thank you. Hamida?
Thank you. I served the last session, and most of the thing we see about keeping our economic growing less in North Dakota is all these red tabs. We have century ago rules that are limiting businesses to grow in North Dakota, and we have worked on some of them, and I'm looking forward to work on that and creating incentive and giving these businesses a way to attract them. And also, let's not forget, when we attract business, we need to be a very welcoming community. Most of our legislatures last session spent a lot of time on unnecessary issues, fighting things that are not showing our community being one of the welcoming. So those are the things that I will work so that businesses will come to North Dakota feeling welcoming, and also limit more of these rules that will keep them not grow away. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared?
Thank you. So, there's been a lot of talk about economic development for many years. And in fact, we've had a lot of focus on that. And there's different ways that's been good or bad. I think one of the biggest challenges we have now is actually workforce development more so than economic development. We have a lot of jobs. We have a lot of businesses. We have a lot of opportunity. But our workforce is either in some cases not prepared, or in some perhaps not even aware of some of the opportunities. So, I do like what the legislature did in the last session dealing with expanding CTE programs. I do support that. I think that's a good thing. I think we do need to make it easier to start a business, even childcare. You shouldn't have to spend thousands of dollars and jump through all these hoops just to get a childcare business going, especially if it's a smaller group of people. And I think also getting rid of unnecessary licensing standards. I mean, yeah, we want our plumbers to be licensed, and our doctors, but we don't necessarily need a cosmetologist to be licensed. I mean, we need to do simple things that can reduce the barriers of entry.
Thank you. Ryan?
Thank you very much for this question. I think one of the biggest things that we should do is we need to support small businesses. Small businesses are the backbone, and we need to make sure that we have the money that's out there that is available gets to the small businesses in our community, regardless, and it needs to go to individuals that represent our community. My district is very diverse, and we need to make sure that money is going to every member of that community that wants to start a business, including childcare. We need to also make sure that we spend an awful lot of money on big business in the state. We need to make sure that we are investing in the individuals. So that means helping individuals start a daycare, that help individuals start a grocery store. I talk to residents that want to be entrepreneurs and want to do that, but they don't know how. And that our commerce department isn't always welcoming to some of our members of our community. We need to make sure to hold them accountable for the money that they do have, to make sure that it does get to every member. So we need to work with the individuals of the individual citizens to grow our economy.
The beep did not go off.
It didn't buzz.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. The time. Okay, sounds good. No problem.
I apologize, but it was
Perfect. Thank you.
when I didn't want it.
All right, next question, and we'll start with Hamida, okay? What is your stance on expanding access to healthcare in North Dakota, especially in rural areas? How do you plan to address the rising costs of healthcare?
Thank you. That's a good question. So, if elected, this will be my second session, and I have served the first session, and I have worked across the aisle with people who are expert on these issues. Not that we know all the answers, but we have to listen to the people who know the answer and address the issue they give us in hand than spending time on things that are unnecessary. And as a Democrat, we have always put people first. And this Medicaid issue and Medicare has been long fight for Democrats, and I will always fight for that and bring resources. Last session, we put a lot of money into creating more beds for, Western North Dakota, most rural areas in North Dakota. I will always support bills that come true and listen the expert on these issues.
Thank you, Hamida. Jared?
Yeah, thank you. So, first of all, my fiance who's here is a nurse. She's an ICU nurse. So when it comes to healthcare, I'm definitely going to be leaning on her for some input. But the real issue, I think, is cost. And I think that, and there is access issues in some of the rural communities, but cost is the real issue. And I think that some of the problem is that we don't even know what things cost. People go and they get bills and they don't realize. So we really need to have price transparency. This is something that was attempted in the last federal administration, and it wasn't very well implemented, and it hasn't been for the last 3 years. But it's something I think we can compel our state insurance department and other agencies to try to force compliance with this a lot more strictly. I also think we need to look at expanding group health insurance options to give people a lot more flexibility and reduce price, because competition does fuel the type of economy that can reduce costs for everybody.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. This is a very complicated issue, and we're very privileged in Fargo that we have access to two major hospital systems within our system, but there's a lot of parts of the state that don't. And we have to balance that with if they should keep their critical access or if they should not, because if some of those places only have a couple of patients a week or a month. So it's very important that we balance that. But what we need to also work on is we need to work on making sure that there is access to EMS, to those services, to make sure that they can be able to be transported to those hospitals. The cost is way bigger than the state of North Dakota. We can try to do some things by making sure that we have caps on certain medications, but it's complicated when you have different types of insurance companies that have regulations. I think, like my other colleague over on the left said, I think it's important that we use our insurance industry and our insurance department to force transparency in the marketplace, because it is very important that people know what it costs to do, to have like a hip transplant. And I guess that's it.
Thank you, George.
So thankfully in District 10, this isn't much of an issue because I think all four of us live within 300 yards of a massive hospital complex, right? So this is something for the rest of North Dakota. I've only had a couple meetings on this, and in both times, the feedback was that the telehealth programs that we're doing, calling and voice chat, stuff like that, has been a really big help, because a lot of times you drive into a city, you wait an hour for your appointment, and the appointment is 10 to 15 minutes. So the way we can kind of help with that is by leveraging technology and making distances smaller in that regard. But I agree with Ryan that EMS is it's a big thing that you can't fix with just Zoom or some other application. So making sure people have access to a ready ambulance and volunteer firefighters.
Thank you. So the next question, we'll start with Jared. Do you believe that those who work in public schools offer the best perspective on what happens there?
I believe that it's a combination of that as well as the parents, because we need to have parental engagement. And if children are communicating with their parents and parents are more engaged through the school board and through parent-teacher relationships, which I think we need to strengthen and continue, then I think it's a cooperative effort. I wouldn't put the burden on any one person, except that from a legal standpoint, parents are the number one driver of their children's education in terms of the decisions that they make and the authority they have and the control that they have through the school boards. The school boards control the curriculum and they control the budget. So I think that we need to strengthen those relationships and make sure that the funds that we have, and we have plenty of funds, by the way, for school. We have $6 billion sitting in the school lands trust, not to mention all the other money. And so the question is not so much the money, but where is our priorities? Is it going to the teacher? Is it going to the classroom? Is it going to the bureaucracy and some of the administrative staff instead? I mean, I've talked to teachers in the district that tell me they don't even know what some of the administrators do. And these are teachers that really have needs. So I think that's where the focus needs to be.
Thank you. Ryan?
Absolutely. I think teachers are a very important part. They see every aspect of it. They see every aspect of that children. I think parents definitely need to be involved as well. But sometimes parents aren't involved, and I think that's where where teachers bridge that gap. I think what the biggest issue that we have in our school system right now is that teachers are more than just teaching. They're social workers, they're educators, they are referees between students, and we need to make sure that we support them in the whole aspect of it, including mental health, making sure they have access to social workers for themselves, not just for the students around them, making sure that they're fully supported, making sure that we have the funds available to pay them what they deserve. We have teachers that work way over what they actually get paid. And I think it's very important that we recognize that that teachers are our backbone, and we should be listening to them, and we should be making sure that we reduce the burden so they can actually teach in the classroom.
Thank you. George?
As a teacher currently working in a school, it's a private school, but I worked in public schools for 10 years, 12 years. This is everything that they've said is correct. Right now we have plenty of money. It's not reaching the classrooms. It's not reaching the teachers. They're not getting the support they need. Classrooms are a lot of times disorderly, and the people who see it are the teachers. The parents hear about it. Nobody knows their kids better than the parents, and nobody knows what's happening in a school better than the teachers. The further you get away from the students, the less you actually understand about what's happening. Parents are connected to the students, and so are the teachers. Other people who are stakeholders have a less accurate view of what's actually happening in the schools, just by nature of their positions.
Thank you. Hamida? Yeah. It says, do you believe that those who work in public schools offer the best perspective on what happens there?
Well, I think I agree with my colleagues here, and I do think teachers have the best perspective. They're the ones who are spending 8 hours with these kids, but that doesn't mean the parent cannot be involved and the parent will not be aware. Again, as everybody mentioned, there's a lot of money coming into our schools, and the way it's spent, we have questions, everyone, whether you are Democrat or Republican, the things that you agree and the things that you disagree, and one of them is how things are run in schools.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Ryan. What do you believe is the proper role of government?
The proper role of government. That's a really loaded question. I think the proper role of government is to support its citizens, to make sure that they have everything to make sure that they have a baseline need for everybody so that they can survive. I think it's important that they don't involve themselves in individual day-to-day lives like healthcare. That's not the role of government. The role of government should be to provide protection for their for the citizens by providing law enforcement and laws. I think it's very important that we also allow freedom of choice so that people are allowed to make their own decisions on how they live their lives. And I think government needs to stay out of those decisions, because I think we all have free will, and I think we need to all do that free will as long as that free will doesn't infringe on others.
Thank you. George?
I believe the job of
Over.
I believe the job of government is to secure your rights. So to keep you safe would be one of the things, to enforce contracts, to provide services that people can't provide for themselves, things that end up being natural monopolies that we don't want to submit to the market, like water supply would not be a great thing if you could privatize that completely. Power is another one where we provide co-ops. But in general, it's the securing of our rights and the maximizing of people's freedom so that they can provide for themselves over the course of their lives and allow them to have the dignity that comes with hard work and the reward for their work.
Thank you. Hamida?
Well, I think I'll just go the easiest way that says government is for the people, by the people. So government shouldn't be, as everyone else mentioned, be involved in people's life day to day, but provide services that people cannot provide for themselves.
Thank you. Jared?
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, more broadly, I would just say government exists to protect our fundamental rights, to our life, to our liberties, to our property. I think that there's a lot more responsibility and role for government the more local it gets, because it's the more connected to the people. It's much more responsive. So obviously we don't want Washington, D.C. dealing with your garbage pickup, but we can have, local services do that. There's also an inverse relationship between limited government and self-government. I think that's very important. I think that's something that's kind of perhaps missing in some ways in society these days, that the stronger you have a sense of community and private organizations and churches and other groups that can come together to provide services for those in need, I think there's less you need from government. It can be delivered a lot better. So I think that the more we strengthen our communities, the more self-government reigns, and I think that's where we need to be.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with George. Can cutting red tape mean reducing health and safety standards? Are regulations in place to keep people safe?
Yeah, in general, regulations are for keeping people safe. The problem with regulations, and this is the most difficult part for people who, for example, even play a simple board game, is that when you read rules, a lot of times people have a lot different idea about what a simple sentence means. Things get pretty convoluted. We have an entire legal system devoted to the interpretation of regulations. The wording of these things is very important, and a lot of times we can't even agree on what a single word means. So can it mean that? Yes, it could. Should it mean that? No, it shouldn't. You shouldn't be jeopardizing people's health and safety with regulations. You should be increasing it.
Thank you. Hamida?
Well, again, it depends what kind of regulation we're talking about, as George said. Some of them may limit people's ability to even advocate for themselves when it comes to their healthcare. Some may not. In general, I feel like rules should only apply to individuals when it is benefiting their life in a certain way. In North Dakota House, we have had a lot of cutting red tapes, but mostly was for businesses and all that. In healthcare, we haven't done much, and mostly it's because, the professionals always say, if we do this, it will cause this problem. And I always like leaving things done locally by the professionals.
Thank you. Jared?
Yeah, I think George had a really good answer to this, and I'll just add that I think that you have a disconnect sometimes between the regulatory apparatus and small business owners and regular people. So in other words, it needs to be responsive. The regulations are not supposed to be an undue burden on people. They're supposed to be a minimum sort of level of, as it was said, protection of safety and the public interest. But at the same time, people need to know what the regulations are, and we can't have unelected bureaucracy making decisions. We elect representatives. We pass the laws. If any of us or whoever of us are elected, we pass the laws. We write the laws, not the unelected bureaucracy that serves in the executive branch. And this is a real problem we have in Washington, D.C., and frankly, it's a problem that we have in North Dakota. That's why there's been state agencies that have been successfully sued at times. So we need to get control back of the regulatory apparatus.
Thank you, Jared. Ryan?
Regulations are important, but there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance between regulations that protect the citizens and the workers. North Dakota, unfortunately, has a very bad occupational hazard rating, and that's because of our lax regulations on certain aspects of it. And I think we need to make sure that we have regulations in place that protect people. And I think sometimes when we relieve those regulations, we provide control to corporations that put profit over people's safety. And I think it's very important that we put people first and not profits. And that's why regulations are important, but they must be to a point that allows for companies to expand and grow and not be prohibitive, but always looking at the safety of the worker that is in the workforce.
Thank you. Next question, and we'll start with Hamida. What do you see as a priority for our state in the next legislative session?
Well, thank you for the question. Our priority for next session mostly is workforce. We have done a lot of work last session, but that is not done. We have a lot of jobs that are opening, but we don't have people to fill that. Last session, we have created Office of Legal Immigration in hope of having talent from all over the world to take these jobs that are open in North Dakota. We hope to continue that.
Thank you. Jared?
Sorry, the microphone. So, yeah, I think the biggest thing overall is going to be prioritization. Like I've said before, we have tremendous wealth in this state. We have $29 billion sitting in various funds, and those, of course, many of them are earmarked for specific purposes. But we don't have the problem that a lot of states have. We don't have a problem looking for money. We are tremendously wealthy. So it's all about priorities. Are we prioritizing the things that have public benefit versus the things that perhaps might have private benefit? And we've seen a lot of issues with this. Just in the last 2 years, The legislature approved budgets that has $750 million in handouts to private corporations, either special interest loans or grants, things that are going to people who are politically well connected, not prioritizing our roads, our schools, our infrastructure, and the things that have a public benefit. So that to me is the number one issue, is making sure we prioritize the things that actually go to people, because people's budgets are struggling right now. They shouldn't be spending more on government than necessary.
Thank you. Ryan?
There's three things: childcare, workforce, and economic prosperity. Those are the three things that we need to make sure that we prioritize. Childcare, we need to make sure that we make childcare affordable for all citizens. We need to make sure that we bring up the wages of those childcare workers, because they are professionals. We need to elevate them to professionals. So we need to make sure that they have the jobs and the security that's there. That will help us build our workforce for generations to come. If we can get early childhood education and we can get people into good quality childcare, we're going to have a prosperous future for 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, if we can do that. We need to make sure we alleviate some of the burden on our families by making sure that we can provide school meals to all of our children in schools, because that'll reduce some of the stress that they have for the cost of living that has happened in this country. And that's also with the childcare, if we can reduce that burden on childcare for those families as well.
Thank you. George?
So if I get elected, I'll have one priority, and I think it actually touches on all of your priorities. I think it's the number one thing. I think it's education. I went into teaching because I believe in the power of education. I believe it helps prevent health problems. I believe it creates economic prosperity. I believe it is the workforce gap. We have the jobs. We don't have the workers. We have to focus on the schools. Right now, the schools are failing. Half the kids can't read when they graduate. Only a quarter of them can do math. How can we build a workforce that way? How can we build a country that way when they don't have anything to provide? They can't have any dignity for themselves because they're not able to get into the workforce. The number one priority for our communities should be the schools, because it is the future.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Jared. What are your thoughts on affordable housing in our district? What policies will you advocate for to address housing shortages?
So affordable housing is a very complex issue. There's a lot of federal policy, so we can't deal with that directly. But one of the things we can do is we can focus on the cost of living. And I mentioned the budget earlier, and it's easy to talk about it over and over because it's very important. The last budget was $19.6 billion. That means every North Dakotan's share of what they're getting from government is about $25,000. So I asked people, do you think you're getting $25,000 worth of government services? Because I know that I'm not. So we have to focus on prioritization. If we can reduce the cost of living, it's going to make it easier for people to afford housing. We also need to make it cheaper for developers that provide housing, and that's where property tax reform comes into it. Even if you live in an apartment like I do and like many people in our district, I think everybody up here lives in an apartment, it still costs because they carry on that burden and they carry it on to the renters by the increased cost of building and everything.
Thank you, Jared. Ryan?
I think affordable housing is obviously very important. I think some of the things we can do, we need to make sure that we're enforcing our current rules around TIF and Renaissance zoning to ensure that they do bring affordable housing into these communities, making sure that those types of programs that are already out there, and make sure that we're enforcing that. I think we should also make sure that we can leverage our state bank to help people buy homes by providing assistance for down payments to get them into housing. I think that's a very important aspect of it, so that we can make sure that is happening. And I think overall, we just need to help reduce the burden of living, and that, again, the cost of living is going up, including our rents. But we can do that by providing school meals to all children, which will relieve some of that, by making sure that it's affordable for childcare, making sure that they have more money in their pocket to be able to spend on the housing that they have.
George?
I would like to see us get past the discussion of affordable housing by solving it through the wage side, to the economic side, as opposed to trying to build cheaper things or trying to subsidize and end up driving up the prices of things. This, once again, is an economic issue. We want high wages. We want workers who can pay for the housing through their own means, through their own dignity and their own hard work. Whenever we create the programs and we try to solve problems, we end up making the problems worse. If we subsidize people buying houses, we give it to everyone who wants to buy a house, they end up all using that money the exact same way to bid up the price of the house. Whenever we make these programs, you end up getting dragged into it for generations. You can't cut the program because now everyone feels the pain. We shouldn't get into it in the first place. Open up the jobs, open up the wages, and the affordable housing, it'll all seem affordable.
Thank you. Hamida?
Well, thank you for the question. I think in District 10 particularly, we have majority of the resident in District 10 is apartment. And just like everyone else here said, it's just the rent is very high for people. And how we can cap that, I think, is to pay people good amount of money at their workplace. People are ready to work. North Dakota has job. It's only that people are not paid well to do this job. So if we can find a way that we can pay these people good amount of money, then nobody could complain about affording their rent. Having said that, also, if the state want to come in and help, we should look into incentivizing some of the program that already exist to help to give people up hand so that they will not end up being homeless.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Ryan. Mental health care access has been a growing concern. What specific actions will you take to improve access to mental health services, especially for children and veterans in our area?
This is a very, very important aspect of this. As a social worker, I think it's important that we have mental health care for everybody. One of the things that we need to make sure is that we have the people in those fields. And I think one of those things that we should do is by opening up and joining a compact for social workers to make sure that we can have social workers have an easier access to North Dakota through regulations and to use their license in their current state that they can use in the state of North Dakota. And I think that's why it's important that we join that compact so that we can make sure that we do have those people available. We also need to make sure that we have mental health care where people are at. We need to make right now we are spending a lot of money on a centralized hospital system, which I think is ill-advised because we need to make sure that it's in the communities that need it, including the communities of Fargo, instead of having to ship them off to Jamestown.
Thank you. George?
Yeah, I agree there. I think North Dakota is too big of a state geographically to have one central location where you're doing it. I'd like to see it broken into either 2 or 3 spots so that it's actually more local. I know it's a little bit less efficient as far as administration, but I think it'll actually go a long way to providing access that people need. There's also the steps, I think it mentioned children and whatever the other group was. As far as children goes, there's a lot of value in just having awareness that these things exist. Kids wouldn't know where to go to for help. The posters on the walls are actually very effective, providing the numbers for whatever hotline it is, whatever website it is. That stuff actually sticks. So it's kind of interesting in that regard. And as far as veterans, sometimes I wonder if workplaces should be required to post the same websites and numbers the same way we do with like OSHA regulations, safety and other things, so that every worker is aware whenever they're having problems of where to go.
Thank you. Hamida?
Well, mental health or behavioral health is very important, and it's what I hear from people when I knock at their door this campaign season. And personally, last session I introduced a bill to put resources into supporting mental health, and that was killed. So number one, we'll start with electing people who care about these issues to North Dakota House, so that when people bring these issues from the district they represent, people should vote for it, not to kill it, number one. Number two, the issue of meeting people where they are. Right now, we don't have all those resources available for the groups you mentioned. And to do that is just to fund them. As everybody mentioned, we have money. We are putting money in the wrong places. We are giving big tax cuts to people who don't need it, and then we forget the people who needs. So to me, I will address that in number one, we need to elect people who care about this issue, and number two, to meet people where they are.
Thank you. Jared?
Yeah, I think pretty much ditto to most of what was said. I think the money is there, prioritizing where we need to go with the money with mental health services. It was also mentioned that a lot of our teachers are facing struggles. I talked to a lady at the doors who's a special education teacher, and she's saying that there's people that don't show up to work because of the stress that they're facing just dealing with the children that are having problems. And so I think, we do have easy vessels for maybe increasing that awareness in our schools all over the state. And I think we need to focus on, as George was saying, and others, that, getting the posters on the wall, things like that. There are a lot of resources available. I think maybe there's not full awareness of some of those resources. And then, of course, prioritizing the budget to make sure that we focus on those resources.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with George. Would you support legislation that would encourage educational freedom for parents with a credit for homeschoolers and parents who would prefer private education?
Yeah, I think right now we can kind of talk a lot about what choice means. Something that I've noticed in the public schools is that you can't even go to whatever public school you want. A lot of it is determined by location. So if you're born in the wrong neighborhood, that's the school you go to. I mean, that's school choice to me. It specifically mentioned credits for homeschooling and things like that. I support homeschool credits because I don't think that you should pay taxes in for a service you're not receiving and also pay on your own end. I understand that everyone is paying into education and you only receive the benefit one time, but to double pay in the same years or in the same 18 years in a row, I don't think it's fair. I think they should get the money back to buy books. A lot of homeschool curriculums cost about $1,300, which is pretty close to what people would pay for their end in education anyway. So I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's fair on both ends. The school loses a full student, 100% of a student, and they would only lose like 15% of the money per student. So I think it's a good deal for everyone.
Thank you. Hamida?
Well, I will just say that last session we had such a bill, and I voted against it because I don't believe putting public money into private institutions or doing that. But I have nothing against anyone who want to do homeschooling as long as they will cover for themselves and the public money doesn't go toward that.
Thank you. Jared?
Yeah, so I disagree a little bit. The public money is ultimately the people's. It's tax dollars. It belongs to them. So I do think that, to George's point about paying for something you're not getting, I think there's a way to compromise on that. I think that certainly we look at our rural small schools where we don't want to completely dry up the funding if you have a lot of people homeschooling or using like a ESA type credit or program. But I think you could make it so maybe it's only 75% of their tax share. So the school is still getting, or whatever percentage we come up with, but the school is still getting some money, but you are allowing that money to follow the child to allow for school choice. I mean, look, the bottom line is our schools are failing in math and reading proficiencies, and we need to allow parents that want an alternative and easy way to do that. Now, that does not mean that we throw in the towel and we give up on our schools. Our schools, we need to focus on the proficiencies, focus on the resources going to the teachers in the classroom so that we can improve the condition of the schools as well.
Thank you. Ryan?
Thank you. School choice is definitely a hot topic these days. I think that parents should definitely be involved with the school system and making sure that they are voicing their opinions within the school system. However, even homeschoolers use the public school system through extracurricular activities, through the libraries, through other activities. So they're not 100% not involved in the public school system. Especially if you have a special education student, they also go in that. I will, however, entertain an option for a voucher program for any under 5, because we don't have a public school system for under 5. And there's definitely programs out there that can make sure that kids get the help they need to even identify dyslexia, any behavioral health issues, so that when they get into the public school system, that they will be the best student they are, and that we will actually reduce the stress on that public school system.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Hamida. Do you believe a person's religious philosophical beliefs should dictate laws made? For an example, abortion, religious education, or the Ten Commandments in our schools?
Well, that's a good question, and we have seen that last session that most of the attack that was coming from my colleagues on the other side was all about religion attacks and going after women's health and all that, and also going after people's choice of who to love and which bathroom to use. I think you should keep your personal belief to yourself. You should not bring it with your decision making, and it shouldn't be dictated to others how you believe or how your belief will be applied into lawmaking. I'm a Muslim. I practice Islam, but that doesn't mean I want Sharia law in North Dakota. I cannot put that. It's my belief. I believe that. I practice that every day. One of the Sharia law things is praying 5 times. I pray 5 times, but I cannot force my colleagues to do that or to apply that in any time that I want to vote on an issue or want to make a law on an issue. So I think no.
Thank you, Hamida. Jared?
So one of the beautiful things about being a nation founded on Christian values is that one of those values is that we believe in liberty and freedom and the dignity of every individual. So you can live under that system and not be compelled to any religious practice. You can be an atheist, you can be Muslim, you can be Jewish, you can be anything. And that's the beautiful part. And the First Amendment, I think it's important to recognize the First Amendment was not written to protect government from religion. It was meant to protect religion from government. And many people came to this country seeking refuge from tyrannical governments, and they wanted to be able to practice their faith freely. So that's a beautiful and important thing about what America is. I think in this discussion, what we see very often sometimes is the other way around. We see mandates on policies that dictate to people of faith how they want to run their businesses and run their lives. So I support protecting people's conscience on their religious choices and not having the government dictate to them how to live their life and their faith.
Thank you. Ryan?
Well, the freedom of religion is the First Amendment, and it's part of it. So I think it's very hard. I think everybody has to have a guiding light, and I think it's very important that every guiding light provides them up to their purpose. However, that guiding light must not impede on other people's rights to worship, to not worship, to their own personal autonomy. Your rights end where the other person's nose begins. And I think that's where it needs to be, and it needs to stay that way. I understand you need a guiding light, but when we start making laws based on someone's individual personal beliefs that impedes on other people's abilities to do what they believe is right, I think that is wrong, and I don't think that's what government is meant to be.
I'm a Christian 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and I'm not going to pretend to leave that at the door when we're talking about prioritizing certain programs. All of us has a worldview, and I would never ask my colleagues to pretend that there's something they're not. While we're debating what the worldview is, what are the priorities for the state, all of those things proceed from your belief system. They proceed from your worldview. You cannot somehow put on an act and say, I am no longer this or I am no longer that, and now I'm a referee, now I'm an impartial judge, and I've gained supreme wisdom. I can actually call things as they are now that I've left my belief system aside. That's the opposite of how it works. So when it comes to passing laws, they shouldn't be draconian. They shouldn't be impeding on people's rights. But when it comes to these things that are difficult, when we're talking about prioritizing dollars, all of those things proceed from your worldview. They proceed from your belief system. And you have to act according to that. And the people will decide if they like it or if they don't like it.
Thank you. Now we'll head into closing statements, and we will start with Jared.
Okay, well, thank you all again for being here. Appreciate it. I'll just say that we hear a lot about division in politics, and I believe firmly that the antidote to division is leadership, and we need people of courage with vision and with purpose. I can tell you that I mentioned earlier, I led the term limits initiative. When I did that, I faced opposition from the leadership of both the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, every lobbyist group in the state that spends millions of dollars in Bismarck to try to get what they want from the taxpayers. And so I have no issue standing alone if it means that I'm standing for what I believe is right. But I also don't know everything, and I'm willing to listen. I like to solve problems. I like to learn. And I can tell you that if there's something I cannot do, I'll be honest with you, and I'll tell you that I can't do it if it conflicts with my principles or it's not a possibility. But if it's something that I can do for the people of our district and our community, nobody's going to fight harder. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Ryan?
Thank you very much for having us with us all on this panel. I think it's very important that we listen to their constituents, making sure that we listen to everybody, what they have to say. Doesn't mean that we're always going to agree on what the topics are, but it's very important to listen and help provide the best policies available for the most amount of North Dakotans. We always have to think of that at the grandiose. We can't just think of that as an individual part of society. So we need to make sure that we are thinking clearly. It's very hard because it's very quick when we're there. I think I try to be open to my constituents. I have my phone number and everything available, and I try to respond as much as possible. I may not get to you right away because I may be busy with other things, but I want to make sure that I am open to everybody. I also want to be a leader that is going to make policies that allow people to pursue their freedoms without government interference, that pursues their health without government interference.
Thank you. George?
If I'm elected and I go to Bismarck, I'll only have 80 days. Less is more in that respect. I'll be focused on improving education, making the phone calls. It doesn't need laws. We don't actually need more money. We need to change the practices. We need to get people headed in the same direction, in agreement as to what education is, what is the purpose of it. First, enculturating the child and giving them a proper set of moral beliefs. And second, giving them the tools that they need to succeed in the world. Right now, we're not doing either. They have anxiety, they have depression, they can't read, and they can't do math. We need to get everyone focused on the same thing, and we only have 80 days. That's the priority issue. That's what I'm going to be working on when I get to Bismarck.
Thank you. Hamida?
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming all. And I will say I've been there last session, and it's true, it's just 80 days and everything is quick. My priority is just to listen the people of District 10 and to be a common sense solution. I sit with my colleague Steve Swantak, and both of us represent District 10 very well. We always put party line aside and work for the people of District 10. I would love to continue that. Serving District 10 has been the honor of my life, and I would love to continue. So hopefully you guys will trust me again with your vote in November 5th and address the issues that I'm hearing from the people of District 10, which is working on our education, providing affordable and accessible childcare, addressing the issue of housing and affordability of housing and mental health. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the candidate forum. Thank you to all of the candidates for participating. For those watching here now or later on YouTube or on Facebook, I encourage you to learn more about these candidates and the others on the November ballot at vote411.org. Thank you to the candidates for your willingness to run and participating tonight. We have a short break as we set up for the next candidate forum, which is North Dakota District 46. Thank you.